Do you have a problem talking about money with your significant other? Biggest cause of stress in a marriage. We're going to tell you how to do it and what you need to know. We'll be right back. With me today is Lynette Dobbins, president of McGee Wealth Management, a nationally recognized financial advisory firm, and Lynette's the president, and she just received her certification from the John Maxwell Institute for coaching. Lynette, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
What a perfect person to be asking these questions. I just read that that money stress is the #1 cause of problems in a relationship, in a marriage, and that in the top 5 reasons for divorce, money's right up there.
Absolutely.
So what do people need to know before they tie the knot about marriage and money?
Well, I think that Vanita Van Caspel said it best when she said it's not so much that you're looking in each other's eyes, but that you're looking in the same direction. And I think that people don't understand that until they get into a divorce court, that marriage is a financial contract.
Right.
And yes.
That can be scary for some people, because what I think you're saying is that you need to have these conversations that are kind of taboo about money and your finances.
Absolutely, and it can be very scary for people to have those conversations, because when we're being raised, money can be used as a punishment, it can be used as a reward. And I think that if we learn to teach ourselves that money is more of a tool and that we don't need to use it as an emotional vehicle, but really send our money on a mission. And so when we're sitting down together as a couple, how do we do that? I often get asked questions like, how do people do their checking account, especially if you have 2 professionals or 2 people that are earning money. And today, most people have 2 incomes in their household. And we're used to how we're managing our money in our own checkbook, but when we come together, how do we do that? Do we have one checkbook? Do we have separate checkbooks? Do we have 3 checkbooks where we have pay the bills together, and how much do each of us contribute, and how much autonomy should we have in the relationship? When should we talk about major expenditures? Are goals the same? Our behaviors, all those things are part of that. And we talk about so many things when we're planning to get married and a wedding, that sometimes those conversations get left out.
And going into debt for the wedding.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Is there a good rule? Should there be 2 checkbooks? Should there be 1? Should there be 3? Or is it individualized?
I think it's individualized. I think it's really into how people are used to paying their bills. Are they going to share all their finances when you're coming in the marriage? Are we keeping something separate? Do we have, is there inequality in assets coming into a marriage?
Probably, most likely.
Yes.
Unless you just graduated from college and you both have the same amount of debt, college debt, right?
Right.
So what about a prenuptial agreement? What kind of questions should you ask someone before you get married? Prenuptial agreement, are you supposed to ask, what's your credit score? I mean, these sound like kind of a buzzkill in a relationship.
They really are a buzzkill, I think, but I think it's important. I think that a little bit of risk in the relationship, a little bit of conversation up front will make a more harmonious long-term relationship. I think prenuptial agreements are very important for people who come into a marriage with assets or coming into a marriage where they may have an inheritance in the future. And don't assume that your inheritance or family money is separate property coming into a marriage. And every state has different laws around this. So you really need to know what your state laws are, not only when you get married, but where you live in the future. When you move from state to state, those laws are governing, so it's not just where you get married.
Well, it's kind of romantic to hear, what's mine is yours, honey, instead of, let's talk about a prenuptial agreement. And so the assumption that comes to my mind, if somebody were to ask me that, is, we're planning a wedding. Why are you planning the divorce already?
Yeah. And I think a prenuptial agreement isn't just about planning for divorce. I don't believe that that is really the intentions of it, although it's helpful, but it really can be a guideline for how we manage together our finances. And the prenuptial agreement also is part of your estate planning document as well, that people don't understand that. But it can be a really good guide. And, I was years ago, I've heard of very creative ways that people have written stuff out, pre-marriage things. There was one couple that wrote it all out on a roll of toilet paper, how they were going to do things, and I think
now that's strange, but okay.
I know, but you can say okay, but the whole idea of it, right, is that they were coming to a meeting of the minds, and that it may have been written on toilet paper, but they had a discussion, and they wrote it down, and it was a guidance, a mission for them. And I think it's important also, if you're going to have children or anything, that you say, okay, well, what are the ground rules here? How are we going to do things? Because we behave differently when we're under stress than when when everything's great. So knowing what those behaviors are and trying to preempt how you're going to resolve issues around this and have some ground rules ahead better prepares you for when those arise, because we always have issues come up. I mean, life isn't perfect, right?
Right, and so you wouldn't even know the questions to ask because, except for one thing, if you want to have children together, I guess a really good question is, so after the kids come, is she going to stay home, or one of the partners going to stay home?
Absolutely.
Because that can be quite stressful if all of a sudden, you're starting your family and you haven't had that discussion, and one of the partners wants to stay home and raise the kids because that's what they believe in, and the other one says, we can't do this. So I can see how these can be really big problems, they can lead to problems.
It is, and it's, and when you look at when we give up our paycheck, whether it's to raise children and we go out of the workforce, and re-entering can be difficult. And so that is a very scary thing for whether it's in today's world, it could be the husband, the father, or the mother that stays home. And so re-entering the workforce later, or when you're doing that, how do you handle money in the relationship? Sometimes becomes a power struggle.
Right. So that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
If one person's making more, or one person isn't working, should I don't know if there's a should here, but let's just ask. Should the person with the most income have the most power over spending or control? Yeah. What do you? I mean, can you? Elaborate on that?
Absolutely not. So, I mean, you're coming into the relationship, you want to have grown rules about that. So, if that's the case in the relationship, it might not be the best relationship, right? Because we want to have a partnership, and how you do that partnership, and how you create territory around things. So, traditionally, we see in families, we've over the last 35 years or so that I've been doing this, is that typically the wife will have a lot of the day-to-day responsibilities for paying bills and buying the household things and the groceries and things like that, and the man will do more of the longer term vision, the more of the investing for retirement and things like that. So it's important to partner on those things. So if one of life happens, so if one of the people in the relationship is deceased or something else, that there's not a big black hole there. So having both partners understand what the cash flows look like and what the long-term investment plan is, and how those two collide to get to where you want to go. So you're planning not just for the individuals in the relationship, but the relationship itself as a unit. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? We're going to come right back from a word with our sponsor, but after we come back, I want to talk about what are some of the red flags you should look for in dating someone, because you can learn a lot if you keep your eyes open to those sorts of things.
Okay. All
right. This is Inspired Conversations. We're talking about money and relationships. We'll be right back.
We have a long line of matriarchal women in our family that I've learned from. My great-grandmother sold life insurance in the 1930s and was a traveling saleswoman. My mother, who is also my business partner, is a pioneer in our industry. I couldn't have asked for any better family to grow up in and develop as a professional certified financial planner. I am Lynette Dobbins, President of McGee Wealth Management and Co-Branch Manager of Raymond James Financial Services.
Welcome back to Inspired Conversations. I'm here with Lynette Dobbins, President of McGee Wealth Management, talking about relationships and money, the big taboo, evidently, and leading cause of stress in relationships. So let's say you're dating and you want it without sitting down and interrogating them. I mean, I've had people ask me that before. You have a 401k? I'm going, huh? On a first or second date, right? So what clues can you look for without, being obvious? You just kind of want to get a feel for what their beliefs are about money, how they spend, and if it matches up.
Well, I think you can, there's being an observer of how people spend their money. Are they philanthropic? How they spend their time? Are they, looking for just the comments that they make maybe about how you spend your money?
Mm-hmm. I have a story to tell on that. You know the story. So I had a boyfriend and we went shopping because we were going to cook together, and so we were buying things, and I threw in one roll of paper towels, and he goes, "Oh, you're splurging." I'm going, "What?" So it's like I just imagine myself if I was married to him, waiting till he's on the golf course, running in with my Nordstrom's box and hiding it under the bed. I'm going, I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah.
So
exactly, but it's great to recognize that because we change our behaviors when we feel judged to try not to create a conflict. And so if you find yourself doing that, then it's, pause and say, why am I doing this? And then maybe if you can risk having a conversation, then you might be able to work through it. But other ways, it might be a red flag that maybe it's not a great fit. But I would ask questions too. So one question might be, so if you won the lottery, what would you do?
That is telling.
Yes, you get an idea of what their values are, right? Mm-hmm. Or what kind of restaurants they go to, or what kind of car they drive, or what do they spend money on the things that they value, and so what are their, kind of adding up what those values are.
I do that because if somebody, they're a waiter and they drive up in a Mercedes sports car, I go, how'd that work?
Yeah.
They're dealing drugs. No.
Yeah.
I mean, so if it doesn't match up, or, they are a white collar 6-figure income and they have a beat up Pinto. Do they make those anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, it can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You can sort of draw connections.
It's like the millionaire next door, drives the quotation, drives the old Buick, right? Versus that. So some people might appear to have a lot when they don't, and they have debt up to their eyeballs. Mm-hmm. So I think that those things are important. Or somebody that's very wealthy, you would just never know it because they're more frugal and they don't show it. They're not showy.
I just thought of something. If you don't know someone has debt and you marry them, are you inheriting that debt?
Potentially depends on what state you live in.
Okay.
So Washington State is a community property state. Oregon is a separate property state. So they're very different laws when it comes around titling and money. But you could argue that it was before, but when you start getting together and you commingle your investments or your assets or your money, then you can be accepting some of that obligation, or when you start opening up joint things. So I think it's really important to have the conversations, and some pre-marriage planning can help with that.
And how do people find pre-marital financial counseling? Where do they go? To a financial advisor?
Yeah, I think so. I think financial planner can help do a pre-marriage financial plan. And a lot of times, especially if you're young, the financial advisors usually will discount that because it's not too complex. But getting a good balance sheet together, a budget together, rules around how you're going to manage money. We have some tools that we use we call it the painless budget. And so part of the painless budget, and we've worked this through people just going into marriage to long-term marriages at all different economic levels. And what we say is, you want 70%, and I say 60% or less on your living expenses. This is your housing, your basic clothing, your insurance, your food, all the things that your needs that takes to live. And then I say, about 20% or more needs to be for the long term, and that's for retirement, your 401k, your IRA, your after-tax investments. And then that 20% that's in the middle is what we call put and take account. It's a put it in, take it out, what most people call savings account. And couples can be really creative with this. And we've had people that say, okay, we have a dream to go to Australia. So they open up an account in Australia, and they each take 5% of their 10% and plug it away into that. And they can make a little competition. So if they have a common goal to do that.
Right.
But that 20%, that's for things that are like, big repairs on your car, luxury items, so go in and buy that Louis Vuitton bag if you want it. It's, you don't have to justify that. If you have something that you want to buy and you're saving up your piece of the discretionary money, that you have permission to spend that without asking your partner
permission. So that gives autonomy, which I think is important for people.
Exactly. And you can be creative about it. So that also is, if you are in debt, that 20% is what kind of helps pay down that consumer debt. And I tell people with cars too, and I know I've probably mentioned this to you many times, but most people, cars are almost like a house payment now. But most of our clients, most of the people that I know that are successful, drive their cars for at least 10 years.
Okay.
And
that's a good rule to think about, because they depreciate.
They depreciate, and they might not buy a new car. It might be a car that's 1 or 2 years old. That's the certified used car, and then you finance it for 5 years, and then you open up a car savings account and you make that payment to that car savings account for the next 5 years. So by the end of the 10 years, you're paying cash for the car. And if you do that, essentially one partner, you're buying a new car every 5 years, but one of the persons is getting a new car every 10 years and never having to finance it after that first car.
Great. That's a great idea.
Yes.
Very good. Yes. Okay. All right. So you're giving some really good tips. So you've told me about 3 relationship combos of spending styles.
Yes.
And so you know who you are out there. So you have spender, saver. One person's a spender, one person's a saver. One person's a saver and a saver. So you have a saver, saver, and then spender.
Yes.
So let's start with one person's a spender, one person's a saver. And how do you counsel them, or what problems might they run into?
So this is where there's a lot of negotiation that happens.
Okay.
And this is where that carving out money to satisfy the spender within rules, within parameters. It says, okay, we understand that you have a need to do this. I would look further into if it's really out of control, why? Because that's more of head heart thing versus a money thing. But have permission for that person to spend that money, and that it's in the budget. But it goes into a separate account.
There's a cap on it.
There's a cap on it.
Right.
So and somebody's responsible for keeping that in check. And there can be friction in a relationship when you have a spender and a saver, right? Saver thinks, I'm trying really hard to look down the road and make sure we're secure, and this other person's spending, and it's taking away from that goal.
And then people start to get dishonest. I mean, financial infidelity. I mean, I've seen it.
Yes,
I've had a girlfriend say, oh, yeah. I said, well, that's a cute little thing you're wearing. Oh, yeah, I got it on sale for $20. And then a half an hour later, it was mentions it's $60. Well, her husband's standing right there. And he's going, so, I mean, there is that.
Or you go shopping, you buy something new, and you hide it in the closet for a couple months, and then drag it out. And it's, this old thing.
Oh,
got that months ago.
Sounds like we are familiar with that scenario. Okay, so then we've got the saver, your favorite.
Yeah. So the saver, as long as it's not on the fringes, right?
Right.
So there's responsible saving, looking for the future, but then you can be miserly, and which takes on a little bit of a negative connotation, right?
Right.
So when we
Hoarder,
get
it sounds like hoarding.
hoarding money, right? So then it's all about the money versus really sending your money on a mission and using your money as a tool.
Right.
So, but
And
those
and
people,
it's imbalanced. It can be imbalanced.
it can be
Yeah.
imbalanced. Yeah. And then what does the money mean, right? So does it mean you want to be philanthropic with your money? What does it mean to you? How are you going to use it? So money to me is energy, and I've expressed this that money is energy, and you really want to direct that energy where it belongs. So, but the saver, they don't really get into financial difficulties. They don't really have a lot of friction in their relationship, but they're watching their money stack up, right? So is that a healthy thing, or is it an unhealthy thing? And it just depends.
Yeah, okay. Now we've got the spender. I guess you don't ever see them because they don't come to you.
Well, so they come in crisis.
Right.
So
Yep.
so they and a lot of times they're referred by their marriage counselors
Okay.
because the spenders get themselves in trouble, and typically it hits a tipping point at just before, at, or after retirement, which is the worst possible time for you to have those issues.
Wow.
So where we get into debt, where people are racking up $100,000 and some of credit card debt, and they haven't really saved.
So they wait until they need help.
They do
before they okay.
when they're in crisis, and so you really, which one are you, and paying attention and getting idea of, am I allocating some for the long-term security, because we do have to take responsibility in our country for our own retirement. The government is not going to do it. Your employer is not going to do it. Regardless of how you feel about the financial crisis and the markets and things like that, you do have to play. You have to put yourself in the game, because you will not be having a good life long term if you don't.
Right. Great advice. Thank you, Lynette. We're almost out of time, so any parting words? I think we've gone over just a little bit that you'd like to share. Any tools?
Well, I think that pre-marriage financial planning, putting together your balance sheet, putting together your cash flow. We budget is kind of a word like diet, right? But I like to be more intentional about it. We call it a spending plan.
Okay.
Because when we call it a spending plan, we're in control. When we call it a budget, it's something that we have to do, and it's not very much fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I know that the audience has got a lot of great information. Thank you for joining us on Inspired Conversations, and we will see you next time.